Welcome to Activate Your Freedom with Nakeisha Geddes, a space for women who are ready to move beyond survival mode into clarity, structure, and intentional living. I'm Nakeisha Geddes, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and someone who understands what it means to carry many roles while still hearing the deeper call to become. Here we have honest conversation about healing, identity, leadership, faith, business, and the practical shift required to build a life that truly aligns with who you are becoming. If you know there are more for you than just simple managing life, then this is the space for you. Let's begin. Why women stay in places they have already outgrown. And when I say places, I don't just mean physical places. I mean relationships, careers, friendships, environments, mindsets, and identity. I know you know what I'm talking about. And sometimes even version of herself. Because one of the hardest things about growth is realizing that something can feel familiar while no longer feel alive. And that realization can be so painful, especially when we have invested years of our life into something. I could go back to when I was at work and I was thinking of leaving. The scariest part wasn't about leaving, it was about starting over. Like, how do I give up 5 weeks of vacation to go back to 2 weeks of vacation? And this is all about seniority because now I've invested over 15 years here and now I have seniority. And seniority is a big deal because that means you get first preference, right? For vacation. That means your ideas, you have invested so much. Now they value you, or so you think, right? And when you're thinking about starting over, now you're going to only have 2 weeks vacation. And now, even when you put vacation request, the chance of you getting first choice is like almost zero. The chance of you getting your second choice is maybe like 20%. So most of the time you're going to get your third choice, right? And it's like, wait, so I'm only going to get 2 weeks vacation and I'm not even going to have seniority to get the date that I preferred, And for a lot of people, it is something as simple as that. Like, this environment is toxic. This environment is no longer serving me. I know I deserve better, but how do I start from the bottom again? And you could also think about relationships with partners. A lot of people stay in relationship with partners because guess what? We have been in this relationship for 10, 15, 20 years. How do I start over? Can I really start over? You start questioning yourself, but you're in pain. You're unhappy, right? But you're thinking about all that I've invested in this relationship. Now I gotta start from scratch. It is scary. Now I gotta be single again, right? Think about having a best friend for years, 20, 30, 40 years, and to lose that best friend. So sometimes we have outgrown these people. We have outgrown these relationships. They're taking us for granted. They're not making us feel good on the inside anymore, but we hold on to it because it's familiar and we've invested so much years. Right? And that realization can be so painful, especially when you've invested so much. Your loyalty, your sacrifice, you trying to make it work. But deep down, your spirituality is being taken to the next level. You know that this is no longer serving you. Your spirit knows. You have changed. And what used to fit doesn't fit anymore. Think many women stay in this place they've outgrown because we confuse familiarity with alignment. Just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's healthy for us anymore. But when you've spent years building a life around survival, responsibility, loyalty, and expectations, it can feel terrifying to admit that you have evolved beyond the life you once prayed for. Yes, We prayed for the current position that we're in. And you ask yourself, but this is what I want. I know I have it. I know I don't want it. But it's not that you don't want it. You have outgrown it. We are meant to evolve. And when you get to a certain level, you must dream again to get to the next level. You know, we were taught to settle. We were taught to be content. But in reality, we were meant to evolve and keep evolving as human, right? There were seasons of my life where like everything looks fine, like extremely everything was okay. Everything was good. I was functioning. I was working. I was building. I was showing up. I was handling responsibility. But I knew I wasn't showing up as my best self. I knew I wasn't I wasn't being a good parent. I wasn't being a good partner. I wasn't being a good employee because I wasn't giving it my all. I was giving mediocre because I didn't even have 100% of myself. So how could I give 100%? I was bleeding internally, right? When I show up at work, I just did what they paid me to do. I didn't go above and beyond. When I come home, I did what I could. But then as soon as I could go hide in the dark, I would, right? So I wasn't happy. So I couldn't make my family happy. Something felt heavy, not because I wasn't grateful, not because I didn't care, but because I was growing. And growth has a way of making old environment feel uncomfortable. And it doesn't mean you got to physically move out of the environment. Because yes, I physically moved out of my working environment, but my home environment stayed the same. But I needed to grow. I needed to expand. I needed to find myself in an environment that challenged me to be a better version of myself. Conversation that used to excite me started to drain me. Places that felt safe start feeling restrictive. You start craving peace more than performance. And sometimes the hardest truth is accepting this. You can outgrow things that once helped shape you. And I think many women know they've outgrown something long before they actually leave it, but they stay. Not because they're weak, but because leaving emotionally is complicated. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes women stay because of loyalty, because of fear, because of guilt, and because they've invested so much time that walking away feels like failure. And sometimes they stay because they no longer trust themselves. So they keep shrinking themselves to fit spaces they have already outgrown. Just imagine you're in a box and you're like in a childlike position. Like, you are in that position just trying to fit into this tiny box and you fold yourself up to fit in it. But it's so painful to stay in this position because you've outgrown this box, but you're forcing yourself to stay in this box. And the more you grow, the more you got to shrink yourself to be in this box. And just imagine how painful all your muscles and your joints are, because you're forcing yourself to fit in this box. But you've outgrown this box. You need a bit bigger box, right? But guess what? You stay silent. Silence turn into exhaustions. And eventually you start feeling disconnected from yourself because your soul will always feel uncomfortable in places your spirit has outgrown. What I've learned is that growth often requires grieving. Yes, you gotta grieve that version of yourself that wanted this. And nobody really talk about that part. People talk about evolving, transformation, and new beginning, but they don't talk enough about grieving that comes with evolving. The grief of realizing certain relationship no longer align. The grief of realizing a version of yourself no longer exists. The grief of recognizing that what once fulfilled you no longer does. And that can create internal conflict because part of you feel grateful for this season, while another part of you knows it's time to grow beyond it. That's why so many women stay stuck between who they used to be, and who they're becoming. And honestly, that in between season can feel lonely because growth change your tolerance. You start protecting your peace differently. You start valuing your energy differently. You stop needing external validation the same way. And the people around you don't understand the shift that's happening inside, but that doesn't make your growth wrong. I want to ask you something. Have you ever stayed somewhere longer than you should have because of familiarity? Not because it fulfilled you, not because it brought you peace, but because it was comfortable. Because many women don't realize this. You can be deeply grateful for a chapter and still know it's time to turn the page. It's time. It is time to turn that page. Outgrowing something doesn't always mean it was toxic. Sometimes it simply means you have evolved. You're evolving. And I think women carry so much guilt around evolving, especially women who are used to being dependable, women who are used to holding everything together, women who are used to sacrificing themselves to maintain stability for everyone else. But eventually, your spirit start asking for more. Not more pressure, not more of you proving yourself. More alignment, more peace, more truth, and more freedom. So, if you have been feeling restless lately, maybe you're not confused. Maybe you have simply outgrown the place you're standing in. And that doesn't mean you need to make impulsive decision overnight. Trust me. Sometimes you got to sit in it and figure out your next step. Right? But it does mean you should stop ignoring yourself, because the longer you force yourself to stay where your soul no longer fit, the heavier life begins to feel. And maybe the next version of your life begins the moment you stop asking, how do I keep surviving here? And start asking, what would it look like to fully choose myself? Thank you for joining me for another episode of Activate Your Freedom with Nakeisha. If this episode speaks to you, please share it with a woman who's silently evolving right now. And remember, you are allowed to outgrow a version of yourself. You are allowed to choose alignment over familiarity. And you are allowed to stop shrinking just to stay connected to spaces you've already outgrown. You deserve the life that you desire. And with that, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this journey of becoming. Have a great day. Before we close, I want to leave you with this. Just because you've learned how to function doesn't mean you have to stay there. Freedom starts with awareness, with honesty, with choosing to listen to yourself in a deeper way. If this episode spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it. And if you're ready to go deeper, make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss what's next. This is Activate Your Freedom, and your next level starts with you.